Now, it is with great delight I am going to present our speaker, Michael Naylor. He's the director of Maine Enneagram Center for Transformation and Well-Being. He is a professional change coach, and he is a former faculty of the Enneagram Institute and a Riso Hudson authorized teacher. He's a licensed addiction therapist and clinical supervisor. He's an International Enneagram Association professional member and teacher. He is also the author of this amazing book called The Alchemy of the Enneagram in Transforming Addiction. There is a monthly book study on surrenderschool.org if you're interested in including Enneagram information into how you work the steps. They're going to be beginning this in the month of January. So if you want more information, I'll post that in the chat. It's surrenderschool.org for how to help you work your program deeper with Enneagram influence and asking your questions according to your type. Something he has written at the end of his emails, which I think is so beautiful. This is a quote worth repeating. He says, "Compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It is a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity." So that's Michael.
Thank you, Melissa. That was great. So hello, everyone. I'm calling from South Portland, Maine, on the East Coast, which is 1:37 p.m. Eastern Time. And today's topic is the Type 5. And if you're new to this, just so you know, there are 9 types. And what that generally means is that one type and its manifestations tends to dominate our expression and response to life. Doesn't mean we don't have some of the patterns of the other types, but the one primary type is something we can count on to repeat itself in some form or another every day. So the work of the Enneagram is to understand that as little ones, little boys, little girls, that our type patterns were available, and to the extent that we experienced a healthy upbringing, which was not too enmeshed in fear and shame and humiliation, our capacity to access the most positive aspects of our type structure was available. To the extent that we had to defend our hearts and shut down to survive difficult times, what we rely on as we get older are the defensive patterns of the type, which, although they saved us when we were little ones, when we had a very sensitive nervous system that couldn't handle really the suffering trauma we might have been going through, when we become adults, these defense patterns that saved our lives also, as adults, block us from accessing the very best of our type, which, no matter what type you are, means we have access to a sense of well-being, to a sense of feeling that we belong here amongst our brothers and sisters, to our capacity to love and feel a loving connection with self and others, our ability to see and utilize our innate gifts that we were given at birth and to actually bring them into fruition. And to the extent that we're free from these defensive patterns or learn how to be free from them, we more and more become able to access these deeper gifts, which we could call our true self or our true nature, what we started out with. So, just a little word about this whole typing thing. I encourage people to type themselves, because if you type yourself and you do the work of understanding what your type is, your ability to actually use the Enneagram in a healthy and practical way becomes stronger. If you rely on somebody like myself to tell you, you risk the fact that I might make a mistake. And many of us do. And we also would rob you of the important work of discovering what your type is. So that said, the other thing that I just encourage you to notice is your tendency to learn about the Enneagram and just be really excited about it, and then to try to transmit to your partner or friends what their type is, because you have a sense that this has helped me so much, it must help them. And this is a natural orientation. You know, when I first came into recovery many years ago, you know, like some of us, I was an instant expert, and I really thought if you just listened to my way, you'd get sober too. Fortunately, nobody listened to me, and I found out that people were quite capable of discovering their own path. So, you know, one of the complaints sometimes people have is that this typology thing can be used sort of as a weapon, you know, where, okay, my wife's acting particularly two-ish, which she's a type 2, and instead of perhaps having compassion for her, I say, oh, you're doing that 2 thing again. Well, if you want to turn people off to the Enneagram, just do that. Just remind them of the neurotic part of their type patterns, and they won't be very interested in going deeper, because the truth is, when you start to learn about your type, it's actually a pretty painful process. It's unveiling. You know, when I first learned about my type, I was shocked that somebody had written about my type, put it in a book, and I read it, and it was describing my internal world. And this was Don Riso, who later became my teacher and then a colleague. But I was horrified, because some of the things that I prided myself in were the exact things that were causing myself and others suffering. And it was a shock. And many people say when they land in their type, the initial experience is of being shocked, like, oh my God, how did I miss this? So I would just say it gets worse. You'll see more of the unseen, but each time you do, you'll have more freedom to have access to your gifts. And the other thing I just want to add, and I think it's worth repeating almost every day, is that one of the challenges around learning to observe yourself, which is the first or the second task of growth. The first is to understand the patterns and, you know, read about them and go, oh, I resonate with that. Then the second step is, can I learn to observe myself actually when I'm caught up in my patterns without beating myself up? To the extent I beat myself up, to that extent it keeps me in the trance of my type or the less healthy pattern. So there's a real wisdom in the idea of, instead of beating yourself, if you're going to beat yourself up, use a feather. It's one of my friends in AA says all the time, use a feather, because beating yourself up blinds you on a deeper emotional level and doesn't support you in your growth. So that said, I just want to mention a little bit about the slowness of change. And when I first learned about my type, I thought, Don Riso has mapped out my neuroses. I should be able to get through this in 2 weeks or maybe 3. I'm a fast learner. I'm pretty smart. And, you know, 20 some years later, I go, some of those patterns are like so resilient. The best I can do is apologize for them or not be so taken by them. But getting rid of the patterns is not the goal, in my estimation. And again, you have to decide for yourself what's true. But getting rid of the patterns that are automatic, that are reactive, that I developed when I was 2, 3, 4, and 5 based on my type, takes a lot of compassion and patience, and the willingness to observe myself trip on the pattern again and again and again and again. And at some point, from kind observation of my tripping onto the ground, something shifts, and I don't get taken by the pattern anymore. And that's when I say hallelujah and thank you, Lord, and Buddha, and whoever else is guiding me through this strange journey. So again, it's the idea of patience. And, in the 12-step program, we talk about progress, not perfection. And I would just emphasize that in spades. And so there's something around learning to observe myself and learning to also try not to change myself with my own hands on the pattern. And, because the tendency is, let's say for myself as a beloved type 4, who at least once a day gets caught up in the emotional quagmire of envy. When I see envy, I go through a number of different responses. One is that it hurts. The second one is I feel kind of shame that I'm experiencing it. A third is I get angry at myself and say, what's wrong with you? You should have handled this 40 years ago. And beat myself up, which just intensifies the unconscious pattern of the type. And then maybe I will wish the worst upon yourself, which doesn't do good for myself or you. But there's something about learning to just observe the pattern and to not generate anger towards myself and just bring a quality of compassion to resting in feeling the pattern and noticing it's painful. And just resting with envy without going into the story that's unfolding, because my thinking center wants to create this story that you got what I needed and I didn't get it, and therefore I got gypped, and I hate you and I hate me, and so now we're in a hate fest. Isn't this good? But if I can notice there's the envy, it's painful. It just about knocks me to my knees. And if I can relax my body, 2 or 3 breaths, bring some attention into my body, and just be patient with the sensations of it, many times it will pass. So if you're a type 4, I invite you to try that maneuver 10 or 15 times a day, because if you notice envy, it's always creeping around the corner. So that said, I just want to point to a couple of resources that if you find that you're really enjoying learning about the type, that you can go to and access everything I'm saying today. The first thing I would just point to is my website. And on the website, I've got up here, it says addiction. I have tons of articles on addiction and on the type. So if you don't have the book and you want to, get in and start reading, you can do it. The book is a little bit different in that it adds the exercises. But there's all sorts of things here. Over here, I have a blog. And in this blog, I have all of the videos I've done on all the types. So it can be a great resource just to go in. And then the things I've done with Friendly Circle Berlin and Surrender School. And then the other thing I would just point to, and again, this is enneagrammain.com. There's no charge. Then the other thing I would point to is my YouTube channel. Can you see that, Melissa? Is that coming up? Enneagram Main interviews. Okay, super. So in here, if you go to this and you click on videos, you'll see that there's close to 100 interviews with people who've been working on themselves for a long time and know a lot about their type. And there's some other stuff in here. But again, if you want to learn about the type 5, the thing that I discovered with all the types is even though a person has the typology of the 5, each person is unique. There's no one type 5 that's identical in any way, shape, or form to another on a deeper level. But the patterns, the personality patterns, may have some similarity, and they get acted out in different ways in different moments. But, we as human beings, are deeply complex. And part of the work of relaxing my personality patterns is to start to be able to drop into the deep mystery of my own presence and existence and just the beauty that's there. So that said, let's take a look at the type 5 and see what we can discover about this very interesting type. And this is a picture of Christ meditating at the Burlingame Center, the Mercy Center in San Francisco. If you're close by, you can go check that out. So the type 5 we call the investigator, the innovator, and also the kind wizard. And part of the reason I mentioned this kind wizard thing is that healthy type 5s have a deep gentleness and a deep wisdom that they love to impart to help people understand and reduce their unnecessary suffering. And again, all the types can have addiction running through them. It's rare today that we get an individual in recovery who doesn't have multiple addictions. It's just the way it is. When I came into recovery some 40 years ago, alcohol was the big substance, but now, most of us are multi-addicted. So I'm going to have some pictures here of some of the type 5s in recovery, and this is, well, of course, this is Harry Potter, and I cannot think of his real name, but he's been in recovery. And what's amazing is when they were doing all the Harry Potter movies, he was heavy into his addiction. And it's amazing that he was able to do as well as he did. Then there's Kurt Cobain, amazing musician, and who ended up killing himself at the depth of his suffering. And then one of my favorites, Stephen King, who's written a book called On Writing. He's been in recovery for probably 30 some years. He was a resident here in Maine, but he talks about his addiction in the book and his recovery. And this is him in his college days when he was the head of the University of Maine's paper, and he looks kind of demonic. And of course, if you've read his books, there's lots of demonic action. And this guy, Kurt Reznor, is a remarkable musician. I think he's the lead in 5-Inch Nails, and has quite an incredible music history, but he attributes it all to his recovery. Then a movie, The Internet's Own Boy, is about a type 5 who ends up suiciding, but had made attempts at recovery, Aaron Schwartz. So, little type 5 cartoon. What just happened there? Okay. Look, Dad, a nerd. And he responds, you know what we do to nerds, right? He says, yeah, we learn from them. So Venus, then this wise kid saying, Venus rotates in the opposite direction to most other planets. So cool. So there's something this points to some of the challenges type 5s have, is they tend to be a little bit or a lot offbeat from the culture they're born into. They bring the capacity to express improvements in how people operate technology, ideas that are very trailblazing in terms of getting through cultural ideas that are conditioned and aren't useful anymore. They really have a strong drive to create a niche for themselves that no one else has occupied before. So very intense on, at their very best, distributing wisdom and opportunities for the growth and curiosity and knowledge expansion for people. So when we look at this investigator kind wizard, we say that they're the intense cerebral type. Well, what does that mean? Well, type 5s will say that their thoughts are intense like electricity. There's this sense in their head center, like, shoo, there's like a lot of fireworks going on. It isn't like the laid-back type 9 who's visiting Narnia and enjoying the peace of the peaceful kingdom. There's just like a very strong intellectual intensity to understand reality at depth. And so we say, at their best, they're very perceptive and innovative. And when they're wounded, if they've been treated badly as a little one, their tendency will be to withdraw and to go secretive, to kind of hold on to whatever they're learning about, and to use their accumulation of knowledge as a way of protecting themselves from the rejection they feel from the world. And we say that the type 5.5 is a rejection type. And there's, let's see, the 2, 5, and 8 are rejection types. And what does that mean fundamentally? That means that when they were a little one, they had a sense on a deep level that they weren't wanted. And so each one of them, the 2, 5, and 8, develops a strategy for dealing with the sense that I'm not wanted. And for the type 5, it's more along the lines of this. I got the wrong planet. I don't fit here. I don't understand these crazy humans. In fact, my accumulation of knowledge indicates that they'll probably end up blowing up the planet. So why would I want to trust them? So there's a real sense that I don't feel safe here. And for little type 5s, the thing that they do when they lose contact with their well-being is all of their attention goes up into their head in creating a library of understanding of their life. And they tend to cut off from the neck down. We call it a psychic schism, so that they don't feel their body as a resource of strength and capacity. And all of their attention goes up into the head. And in a sense, that's where they go to have a feeling of strength. So, again, what we can say is there's a range of possibilities depending on what kind of experience they had as a little one, the trauma they experienced. There's a really amazing type 5 that is one of my favorite teachers, whose name is Eckhart Tolle. And if you ever have a chance to listen to him, you can see that like almost 100% of his awareness is up in his mind that's very quiet and clear. I expect at any time that he will just ascend up into the heavens, and that's the last we'll see of him. But there's this incredible gentleness, and for the type 5, one of the most important things that they can learn to do is to begin to be able to inhabit their body and the sensations within their body as a way of anchoring their sense of strength and confidence. And I'll talk about an exercise. If you go to the Surrender School, there's a number of meditations that they put up that have to do with learning to sense the body. So we start off with, the best of the type 5 is this capacity. It's like an intuitive capacity to kind of see the underlying truths that are veiled by a cover of facts and information and details. They have a way of seeing through and actually organizing deeper principles of understanding over things that most people, myself included, trip over. So a lot of physicists, a lot of chemists, a lot of software experts are type 5s, that ability to deal with complex information and to make sense of it with a strong analytical and intuitive capacity. That's one of their innate gifts, so that their ability to see through obscurations and see clearly what's there is one of their gifts. So we say insight, awareness, recognition are some of the capacities they have. And of course, if we're looking at the essence of any type, we're talking about what their fundamental gifts that they are potentially born with. And of course, all the types have to navigate childhood, which for almost all of us means I got to develop some protective layers around me, because I didn't have the Dalai Lama's parents, and I had parents who were just learning to be parents when they had me and made all sorts of mistakes, as I am myself. But what this does for the type 5 kid is I've got to develop a protective layer, which we call the ego. And in that ego protection is the fundamental protective patterns of the type 5, which is something like this. One of the things the type 5 does to protect themselves is they vacate their heart. They shut their heart down so it becomes almost dry and unaffectable. It's like 1-5 says, what I did when I was a little kid is I beelined right up into my head center and started building an encyclopedia of knowledge and wisdom to protect me. But I lost contact with my heart when people started talking about, what do you feel about something? He would say, well, often, I don't know. Can you give me a book on that? I'm not really sure what that means to feel. So there's a way that 5s really disconnect in a strong way. And we say that they're a thinking type. And when they lose contact with that sense of well-being, that is safe to be here, the basic fear arises of having no ability to know what's true, and to feel really lost in a sea of ignorance. There's a sense of feeling like, if I don't know the facts on things, I'm really vulnerable to being harmed by many people. So the secondary fear is that my intelligence is insufficient to give me confidence and understanding. So for the type 5, their survival starting with when they were little ones, is to accumulate knowledge. And the thing that's amazing about them is, of all the types, they're one of the types that remembers much of what they study. It's like I can just go up into my head center and I pull that book off the shelf that says the Enneagram and go right in, and there's a way I have access to remembering the things I've learned. And that's one of their Jedi skills. They're not the only one, but fives overall have quite strong capacity in remembering things that they've studied. So my fear is that I won't know it's true and that I don't have enough knowledge to protect myself. So what do I do as a type 5 when I'm scared? I go into withdrawal. I isolate. I go into my isolation room, as one of my type 5 friends said. I cut off and go read books. I've got one lovely type 5 friend who often said in meetings, he'd say, well, okay, I'm here. Do I really want to be here? No, I do not. What do I want to be doing? I want to be reading a book. But I know if I don't come here, none of these books will get read because I will be slaughtering myself regularly with alcohol, hallucinogens, and whatever I can get my hands on. So here I am. I'm at least willing enough to show up. So there's this sense of, sometimes for type 5s, that I feel like I don't naturally fit in with others. With inner work, that can be minimized and healed, but that's a big one for type 5s. It's a feeling like, and type 4s have this too, like I'm the outsider. Type 4s often feel like I got the wrong parents. The type 5 often feels like I got the wrong planet. And so there's this whole deconstructing of that pattern that allows them to connect, and it's doable. That's what people do. I recently did an interview, if you're familiar with Russ Hudson, who was the author with Don Riso of The Wisdom of the Enneagram and started the Enneagram Institute and were my teachers. He's a type 5. And if you want to really get an inside look of what is it like to be a type 5, go to my YouTube channel, and the last 3 or 4th interviews with Russ, I think you'll be amazed. He really is considered the leading teacher on the planet, and certainly was for me. So the basic desire is to understand reality at depth. I want to know how things work. If you've got a type 5 in your life, they're always oriented towards finding out, how does this thing work? Whether it's the plumbing, the electricity, the nervous system, the cellular life in our human body. There's this sense of I want to go down and understand things at depth. Underneath it also is a fear. I do not want to be seen as stupid or incompetent with my intelligence. So it's a double-edged sword. One part of it is just I love knowledge, I love studying. A healthy type 5 is curious to the max and likes to inspire that in other people. But if I've gone through trauma, part of my response to learning is to make sure that I don't appear stupid. It's an Achilles heel for the type 5. So my self-image, what I believe myself to be as a type 5 is I'm perceptive. I'm smarter than the average bear. Most of you aren't really up to speed with my intelligence. If I'm healthy, I have compassion for that, but I'm smart, I'm curious, unusual, objective, and insightful. And when I'm healthy, I'm really wired towards inspiring that in other people, being very generous with how I reach out and connect with people. I think of a really generous type 5. One was Mr. Einstein, and the other is Stephen Hawking, who is just really loves helping people understand profound concepps. There's another guy named Neil deGrasse, who's also just loves to give away his knowledge and wisdom, and he could talk for days about the majesty of the universe and all of the extraordinary quirks, and so healthy 5s just love to give that away. So we say that the 5, when I have to protect my heart due to my challenges as a little one, that I develop what's called the passion of avarice. And avarice really is a strong need to protect my time and my space. It's not about acquiring things and holding on to things and being stingy, but it's a protective maneuver, because when type 5s have grown up with stress, they have a terrible sense of vulnerability around being harmed by others, as their connection with their inner strength in the beginning is not strong, and they can have this feeling that at any moment, if they're not prepared and they're in the wrong situation, that their capacity to protect themselves is like a dry leaf in the wind. They can just get blown away by the slightest breeze. And so they start to isolate, in their own particular. 1-5 says, yeah, I've got a castle I go to, my inner castle, and it's pretty hard to get through the front door unless I permit you in. But that's what I do in regards to the fear I feel. We say 5s are fear types, and it shows up around this sense of being vulnerable and noticing, actually with pretty clear awareness, the danger in the world. And when I'm healthy, if you ever listen to Eckhart Tolle, he'll talk straight and clear about the danger that's here. He says, right now we are in one of the biggest transitions in humanity, where for the first time there's a growing number of people who are becoming conscious. And the second, on the other side of it, is the collective unconscious is coming to the fore, and in the form of fear, greed, self-centeredness, and a sense of mistrust towards humanity. He said, we're at a pivotal point where if we can get through this shock point, the capacity to bring more and more people into a state of awakeness and alertness is viable. But he doesn't cut any corners. He just goes right to it. But he does it with a type 5 sensitivity. And he'll say, okay, if the whole thing goes down, we'll just start over. No big deal. So there's a lightness to it. So what does he do as a type 5? He's always giving out information on healing. So we say that for the type 5, the wake-up call is that when I'm under stress and not able to bear it or be conscious with it, is I withdraw into my mind and start to study reality rather than to be in it. I start to collect information to feel safe and strong. I become an observer of people rather than a participant with them. And we say that when the type 5 has a wounded heart, they have a cynical, distant heart, which means they have a kind of cynicism that covers a sense of loss and hurt that they experienced as a little one. These people here on planet Earth, they're not really very useful. I don't even really know why I want to talk to them. But as I heal, I develop the wise, tender heart. As I heal the rejection I felt, as I do the inner work I need to do. So what begins to happen is I start to embody my contact with my physical body, as I begin to wake up my aliveness, and that moves me in the direction of the confidence of the 8. And that's a whole another story that we'll cover down the road a bit. It won't be today. So I developed the path of compassion and understanding and really serving people. So let's see. That said, we have this levels of health tube, and you see at the top of it there's the Enneagram, and the star there is 0.5. And the point of this tube is to depict the 9 levels of health of each type. And so we're going to go through the type 5 and talk about that. But the general story is, when I'm healthy as a type 5, that my awareness what's the word I'm looking for? My awareness stations itself in levels 1, 2, and 3. And what that means is I have access to knowing and noticing when I'm triggered by people around me, and I'm aware that my triggers are my responsibility, that they're not the cause of my suffering, although they may be triggering a point in me that's painful. But I start to develop a compassion for people from the standpoint I realize that people are actually doing the very best they can with the knowledge they have. And that's a healthy type 5. I'm aware that even the ignorance and violence, etc., is a result of the suffering people have gone through that they haven't healed. So on some level, I'm able to see the innocence in people and in myself. I also am aware that I do the best I can with what I know and what I've learned. So at levels 1, 2, and 3, I don't withdraw. I enjoy being with people. I stay present with them. And I love to give away what I've been given, which is my knowledge and experiences. So I'm perceptive and observant and focused and innovative. I've got an eye on transforming whatever I lay my eyes on into something that works at a deeper and more economic and functional way. So when I start to get overwhelmed with fear, shame, rejection, etc., based on childhood stuff, I'm often living at the next level of 4, 5, and 6. Levels 4, 5, and 6, basically the protective mechanisms of my type are in place to protect my heart. When I'm at levels 1, 2, and 3, my heart's open. I know how to take care of it. But at levels 4, 5, and 6, I'm dealing with some of the conditioning I received as a little boy or little girl to survive. And for a lot of little type 5 kids, they'll say, going through grade school was horrendous. I felt like one of the weirdos in the school. I felt like I didn't have a social group that really connected with me. I might join outlier groups like, anime fans or definitely computer science. And for some, music really becomes the outlet. But I start getting stuck in trying to figure things out in my head before I take action. So we say here, at level 4, I begin indulging myself in constant speculation and theorizing, living in my head, examining life and people as if they were objects under a microscope, addicted to collecting and filing information in my head as protection from the deficient feelings I have regarding engaging people and life. So as I am more constricted on a heart level, I become more preoccupied with my conceptual structures that I start formulating in my head, and constructing, theoretical worlds in my head is not a bad thing as long as I'm bringing them into reality to see if they have any validity. But I start to live in whatever I'm imagining about these theoretical worlds, and start to really distance myself from using them as gifts. So I get more detached. At level 6, I tend to get antagonistic and provocative. And well, what does that mean? Well, all the types, when they go down the levels, at levels 1, 2, and 3, they're in contact with their gifts. At level 4, 5, and 6, these gifts actually start to be used as a form of protection and aggressiveness. So type 5s at level 6 can remind you that fundamentally, the core of you is just filled with pure stupidity. So have a nice day, right? And if you don't really understand that, let me show you exactly what I notice about your stupidity. At level 6, when I'm really feeling oppressed by the world, that intelligence and perception of mine comes out as a weapon because I feel like I need protection, and I can get pretty darn vicious just to get you the heck away from me. And then 7, 8, 9, we call, really, this is where people are overwhelmed with pain and suffering and can't think objectively. So for the 5, at level 7, I get nihilistic, life doesn't mean anything, everything's stupid, makes no sense to try, it's just a dark, ugly planet that will blow itself up. I get delirious, start hallucinating at level 8, so we have really starting to have really strong breaks from reality at level 7 on down. Levels 4, 5, and 6, I'm disconnecting from reality, but it isn't quite as violent as I go down the levels. And then level 9, I kill myself. That's not an unusual out for the type 5 that get hopeless and they say, I can't be here anymore. So let's see how we're doing. So it looks like I've been speaking for almost 45 minutes. This is a world record for me. But I have a few other things to say, and then we'll have some questions. Core addiction of the 5, I identify powerfully with a sense of being a detached, outside observer of the world, not a part of it. I'm an outsider. I'm studying you as though you are a lab experiment. And I have this thing of resisting recognizing my physical presence and state of my feelings and my needs. It's like I just disconnect from everything below the neck so that I can't feel my needs. The only thing I know I'm really aware of is I need to collect information. When I begin to get healthier, I start to feel my heart. I develop the strength to experience my vulnerability and not feel like I'm going to disappear into outer space. All of these things are the growth path of the type 5. So, compassion and understanding, the path of transformation. Maybe my future will be okay, which means I start to notice that I have a way of imagining the worst, and I begin to make some conscious choices about not doing that. Maybe I can trust people and let them know what I need. So I begin to invite people in and to really begin to feel on a real deep level, I want connection with people. I've just learned to not feel that as a way of surviving as a little boy or little girl. So, just a question, what's your relationship with your curiosity? What are you curious about? Do you actively engage your curiosity? And that's to just take a look at your 5-ness yourself. So, that said, let's see if any questions are brewing, if we have any type 5.